This is Bob Brown. Welcome to B Cube Live, B Cube Sunday morning. It's a sad Sunday in fandom. I know you guys have all heard. Cliff, you've heard about Greg, and
Yep.
hey, I loved having Greg on the show. He was a fountain of knowledge. So what I will do is when I get off of here, I will post onto the BCube project page and BCube Press and my own page links to the last time he showed up on this show, and he talked about he'd rather be an artist, or that's how he got started. And it'll give you guys a chance to see the man
When I get off it,
outside of his normal screen, so to speak. But Cliff, tell us about yourself.
I'm a writer. I'm saying. I have a number of short stories out, including some that are coming out next year, and is germane to this discussion. I know you want to talk about gaming, so we'll get to that. Discovered through
that's good.
Games. Yeah, I discovered through role-playing part of my brain that does role-playing gaming, and the part of my brain that writes fiction is the same. If I want to do one, I have to rob Peter to pay Paul. Yeah, I've decided to focus on fiction, although I do still do some gaming. I got a story coming out in February. Is my next story. It's coming out in a book of westerns, edited by David Boop.
Oh yeah, David is just a remarkable editor, and he been working with Bain Books, I believe, for this. Correct?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's a great.
And earlier,
it is.
I was in an earlier book of his, which was Weird Westerns, also with Bain Books. Part of his straight out. There were 3 of those, and there's 3 of these, and this is book number 2. And with some awesome writers like Walter John Williams and just some fabulous writers this time around. I'm looking forward to that book coming out in February.
That is most excellent. Well, the reason we're talking about games today is oh, that's your coffee.
That is my coffee cup.
Well,
which I will.
Is the
classic Player's Handbook illustration. And this is
Dungeons and Dragons. I've heard of.
Yeah, Judges Guild, one of them. If you remember the Judges Guild back in the 20th century.
You know, I'm in so much trouble.
Accoutrement.
Okay, I am.
Comments.
We are doing this from a. I just learned something new about this. We are doing this from a laptop. I'm down in Texas, where I am pleased to see there's more buzzards hanging around than I'd seen around here since I was a kid. And I'm.
Are we talking
cool to look up in
literal
the sky
buzzards?
Literal buzzards. Oh, my mother just passed away, so there's a few other kind of buzzards hanging around too, but every family knows about that. But no, I'm talking about looking up in the sky and seeing those big black birds. That as a child, when I came down here, that was the first time I ever saw anything like that. And they're probably sin when you get up close to them, but buzzards are beautiful as they just soar across the sky looking for yummies.
Yeah, I saw. Took the family to a park here in California this last spring, and there was a buzzard circling around at a distance. Have you ever seen a California condor? They're just from the neck up, and they're beautiful from the neck down, and they're huge. Saw one when we were down in Big Sur flying over Highway 1, and it was, you think, oh yeah, it's like a big buzzard, but no, it's like a whole other experience. Those things are gigantic.
Yeah, they got to be big. Now, I was just looking down here at my audio.
Mm-hmm.
We're for somehow, I don't know why, but my chat function doesn't work here.
I was seeing
what happened
chat.
To you? I think you
don't
dropped
know where,
your camera.
Oh, my camera. Let me see there. No, that ain't it. There we go.
But that's a fine looking wood grain out there.
Yeah, that's our kitchen table.
Anyway,
there we go.
There you go.
We are experiencing
I like that you were in that dungeon. Oh, I said I like that you're wearing that Dungeons and Dragons shirt.
Yep. It's one of the Judges Guild ones that I did some things on Kickstarter, and I also have I couldn't find it this morning, but a Dark Tower T-shirt from their famous Dark Tower module, which has lights on the cover and all that.
Oh, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
My daughter's really annoyed at me. She told me. I learned how to play Dungeons and Dragons in 1977. A fellow who knew pretty good. We were thrilled with a thing called Men in Magic, and then the second one was, but then what was the second book?
I'm black. The audience can remember. That's great.
I don't know.
Somebody
can you,
says, "Hi, Cliff. Hi." So I can see a bunch of the comments, but they're mostly from where I'm sitting. So I'm like, "Hi, whoever just said hi to me."
Well, I'm having trouble seeing the comments today.
Yeah.
Oh, good. There. Say good morning, Liam.
Yeah, if you're commenting from this, we see your name. But if you're commenting from Facebook, we don't see your name or your profile user. So you could say so and so, and then we will see it.
Okay, I'm not seeing any comments. So, can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you fine. Most out buzzards and somebody Liam once in college, and he confesses that it was an interesting experience. So the feed is pretty choppy. This may be a Texas
that's what they're saying.
Bandwidth issue.
Oh, well, there was a runaway pregnant woman down here, and they got probably 50 guys looking to chase her down, get the bounty on her. So it may be that they're sucking up all the bandwidth looking to do that. That was a joke, son. Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Cliff.
I'm picturing Star Wars bounty hunter, somebody, Boba fat
Okay.
coming after you for being pregnant.
Hey, Cliff.
Mm-hmm.
I
Can
am
you hear
going
me?
to. Yes, I can hear you, but it's very delayed. So I need you to hang around long enough to listen to what I say, and then you can act on it. I am.
Okay.
Obviously the source of the feed speed problem. So I am going to silence myself, go off screen, and let you talk to the folks about gaming, responding to comments, etc., so that they're not all completely bored to tears because you know much more about it than I do.
Okay. Everyone. So Bob told me that he wanted to talk about tabletop, and most of my experience in tabletop role-playing games is, which is to say the 20th century, which is to say the 19s, a little bit the 1990s. So if you want of gaming from a perspective of someone who grew up in most, and then made it to early Gen Cons in the early 80s. So back at that time, I don't know if I don't know what generation folks are from, but Dungeons and Dragons was invented and Gary Gygax, and by the time I started playing, they had a falling out. But I went to Gen Con and I met both of them because it was a scene where you see Gary Gygax at Gen Con. It wasn't that huge. I mean, maybe a couple thousand people tops. So they were very open to random, punk teenagers asking them questions about things like how to pronounce the word drow and stuff. Talking to them, but them was cowboy. So gaming has had this weird experience. I don't know, weird influence on fiction and vice versa. Because when I first read like J.R.R. Tolkien, I finished The Lord of the Rings, and then I was like, okay, I want to read something like that, and there was nothing like that. There was no epic fantasy genre. There was no Dragonlance Chronicles. There was no David Eddings. There was nothing. There wasn't even this. So, there Dungeons and Dragons. Soon, I didn't really find out about D&D until the late. Oh, yeah, someone gamed it with Dave Arneson and a con in the early 80s. I gamed with Dave Arneson at a con, a little bit lovely person, and I'll talk about that. So this idea that it took a lot from Jack Vance and Michael Moorcock, but obviously the first edition had hobbits and ents, and they had to change it for copy to halflings and tree ants and things like that. So yeah, it started interacting with fiction because people could sort of live. There was a virtual reality, right? Hallucinatory, and in a similar way to fiction is. I have some friends who do a wonderful podcast called Writers Drinking Coffee. They talk about various fiction aspects and the way it interacts with human mind. And there's another wonderful hour, which is look at storyhour2020.com. Daniel Marcus and started it, and is two readers that read on Wednesday. Refer to spinning the fictive dream in the story output. Dungeons and Dragons was a collective version of spinning the and Boot Hill and all the early RuneQuest, all the early games. Gamma World, one of my favorites, because it was this like wacky mutant mayhem thing. Like science fiction, it was shaped by the early personnel. My family on my dad's side comes from Wisconsin. Living in Memphis for much of my childhood. I went to Chicago for college, and I understand Midwestern winters, and I understand why the game in Wisconsin, because before cable TV, you were kind of stuck in winter for several months, so you might as well the living room. That's the thing. So, if anyone has, let's read some of the comments from Robin Moore. I gamed with Dave Arneson at a con in the early 80s. Dave Arneson story. I gamed with him in the early 2000s in Black. For those who don't know, the first fantasy role-playing campaign setting ever, because he dated Dungeons and Dragons. And Dave, he had a button that said "Father of all gamer nerds" or something, which is true. And he was just lovely, and he was a hoot. And I'll tell you one cute anecdote. So we were fighting in giant bugs, sentient giant bugs, which is and sentient giant bugs. I was playing a wizard. It's called like a wizard eye, which is kind of like a magical drone. You go and you sort of spy on the enemy, and in this case, it was bugs. And I saw that the bugs, the giant insects, had one of them had a scroll out and was like a giant or magic user, and had this scroll. And I looked at it and I read the runes on the scroll, and he looked at me. No, they're bug runes. So, hilarious thing. Just the way he did that. So that was and I survived the adventure and went up a level. So I'm very happy. Let's look at some of the other comments. It's no coincidence that a lot of sci-fi and fantasy authors got their start. That is true. That I did. That is how you learn about plot, character. Yes, in fact, that moved me on the path from game mastering and dungeon mastering, with writing and occasionally selling science fiction and fantasy. Part of the main characters doing whatever someone who wasn't me wanted to do. Come up with this elaborate adventure, and then the character in the background, he looks interesting, let's go talk to him, and then you go off and do something completely different. You know how it is, because they're played by other people. So I'm like, I want to make the characters do what I want. So I did. So I fired my players and started writing, right? And then I learned, of course, the hard way, that the characters still don't always do what you want them to do. But that is part of the weird experience of being a writer. There were some absolutely RPG fantasy adjacent on that category. Was Quag Keep by Andre Norton, who in Gary Gygax's World of Greyhawk, about people who got sucked into the fantasy characters. And that was like before any of the TSR novels like Dragon, like Dawbook. So that was that was a new idea back then. But yeah, I think one of the big influences, Dungeons and Dragons and other fantasy role prose genre of science fiction and fantasy in particular. Like you read Tolkien, and he language and myth, and so he has Sindarin and Quenya and the Black Speech and all this stuff. But what exactly kind of magic does Sauron wield? What kind of magic? Kind of vague, right? What are these? The three elven do? They do magic-y stuff, you know. Because magic was this weird thing that the protagonist did, and the Hobbit certainly did. And I'm not sure Tolkien understood how it worked, but he knew myth worked, and so it had the feel and the vibe of mythic magic, and he knew that it couldn't intrude too much into the plot. It should be the sense of otherworldliness. I think he conveyed that extremely well, and magic was written. And then came along Dungeons and Dragons, where you need rules because fair. You got a game. A game has rules. You know, and what do people say about their favorite writers, like Brandon Sanderson? Oh, I love his, the magic systems he comes up with, or this, or I've seen writers like, what is, what do you do? First, you have to be good at creating a magic system. All right, I'm writing a new fantasy. I'll start with characters or plot or setting. I start with a magic system. So I think influence. Now, is it a good influence or a bad influence? Well, it depends on how you do it, right? So, like Brandon Sanderson just does really great magic systems because he's very, very good at that, and they're about. So, and Tim Powers was doing years of what he called hard fantasy, which is like hard science fiction, only fantasy. So, like how the magic worked in whatever novel he was writing, and consistent and scientific, except for the fact that there's magic. So, like that. So, I think gaming has had a profound influence on prose. All right. Games with some could be a fun bonding experience. First time I was working at Apple in the 1990s, because hey, newsflash, I'm a tech nerd. We used to play actually a computer game, marathon after work. Was a bonding experience. Choppiness has been a problem. Game at the student center after. Too bad that somebody reported you for gaming during business hours, even though you'd been there at 6. Sorry to hear that. Facebook user, anonymous. All Facebook users are anonymous to me at the moment. Met and had a wonderful. That's wonderful. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try and I'm going to bring up the Facebook feed and see if I could identify who's making comments. Do that without bring up the Facebook feed. There we go. See who's making comments. Okay. Cheryl says, howdy y'all. So hi Cheryl. Theo said morning all, and Andrew, and lots of people with actual names. That's wonderful. So because we're having technical difficulties, I was expecting to have a conversation with Bob rather than the solo podcast. I'm happy to take questions. Because, but that's okay. So, in my own writing, to go somewhere in between, Brandon Sanderson and J.R. Tolkien, I dig on magic systems. I kind of like magic to be mysterious and strange. It still has to feel to the reader behind it, right? So, again, you're spinning, as they say in the story hour, and so you don't want to wake from that dream. You have to talk to show a sense of otherworldliness, but not like, oh, that couldn't happen, right? So the reader, you make a pact. We're going to pretend magic exists, but we're going to do it in a way that makes right. So there's that. Okay, I got a question from Barb. Says the joke was on them. We then bought all our snacks and drinks from the little store across the street instead of from money. Good. The best revenge is living well, Barb. I approve. Liam, traditional board games going the way of the dodo. Now the online game is a big thing. You know about that, but this huge, ironically, online is rival because these podcasts like Critical Role, where people don't quite understand it, but I'm sure that somebody can explain to me. People are playing entertaining, witty people, making entertaining, witty comments, and they're doing it on various kinds. I think like Twitch or YouTube or wherever. And so there are these of gamers playing a role-playing game, and people are watching, and that enjoyed that so much that people who'd never gamed before gaming. And Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, which is the current one, is huge. It's giant. You go on crowdfunding sites like Kickstarter. Oftentimes the products that do the best are related products. They like fund and like tabletop gaming. And there's also a lot of like European board games have been imported to the U.S., like Settlers of Catan, right, which was a German game, has done really well. So unexpectedly, the online has led to a revival of the tabletop experience, which is a good thing. And so nothing replaces. I mean, we had COVID, and then we all had to go to Zoom for a while. But this is like hanging out with your friends. You can't like have snacks with your online gaming unless you agree to meet up and all be in one room, like we did on Fridays at Applethon, but we were using a local area network, or LAN, if you remember that term. Yeah. And again, that was like after business hours. I was like, a couple hours. So that worked. Where was I with that? Okay, so I think that answers your question. So other people in gaming came with at Gen Con back in the early days was Jim Ward, who invented Gamma, among other things, Metamorphosis Alpha and Gamma World, and he was a hoot. These guys were very kind of their adventures were deadly. They did it to kill a lot of characters. So yay. I never gamed with Gary Gygax, but I like I said, because in those early days I met him a bunch of times when I was a teenager, and had some you might conversations with him, and I liked him. But these guys were all they were pretty back Midwesterners in some sense, right? But at the gaming table, that kind of personality, I think like Gary, John W. Campbell of gaming, right? Like he had an oversized, his personality influence and set waves into the field, which are still. So one of the things that I think successful was that they allowed other people to write adventures. So I'm wearing a shirt from the in the 1970s in Illinois, in Decatur, Illinois, a gaming shop with their own magazines, and they were writing D&D compatible. And for a while, then TSR, which then by Wizards of the Coast, which then got bought up by Hasbro, we're not allowing anyone else to do related stuff. And then it wasn't as popular. And then they created the D20, 20-sided dice system anyone could use. So there were parts of it that were made kind of, or at least publicly usable. And as a result, like if like 5 gazillion 5th edition D&D in different universes, and that's a cool thing. You can now play. There's one company that did like Escape from New York with 5th edition compatible rules, which is interesting because back in the day, TSR did a board game called Escape. One time, I was at Gen Con. I had just picked up a copy of Escape from New York at the auction for like Kim Moen, editor of Dragon Magazine, and Gary Gygax get on the elevator, and Gary's looking in my hand and says, "Oh, hey Kim, you remember when we used to play that all the time?" And so apparently Gary Gygax wasn't the best Escape from New York player, but that was the kind of that was cowboy days, right? So that was the kind of thing you saw. That was so I'm currently actually I most because like my gamer brain is the same as my writing brain. I'm now in a 5th edition game as a player, not a dungeon master, and so that's kind of come around full circle. Like I skipped 2nd, 3rd, and 4th edition for the most part, and playing a character, playing a Drow paladin in 5th edition. So that's kind of fun because it's a bunch of other people who gamed back in the day, and to be in that group. I did spend some years doing Amber Diceless Roleplay, full game designed by Eric Wujcik, based on Roger Zelazny's Chronicles, feeling of it really well, with a very minimal rule set and all the NPCs from the books. There were multiple versions of them, and the game make their own things like that. And so there's a small community, and they have an Amber Con every year. And who just said that nice thing? Somebody said Amber is a fun system. And if I can get Facebook to cooperate, I can figure out who said that. Operating. Okay. So anyway, but I used to go to every year and do till I had kids and did AmberCon and Pleasures of Zelazny's Universe, and my very, very first published piece of fiction was set in the Amber universe in a magazine called Amber. We paid, and Eric Wujcik was a champion schmoozer, and he got Roger Zelazny to agree to let him to write a game based on his books. And he also said, "I want to do a zine called Amber Zine, and able to publish the original fiction in the Amber universe that ties in with their campaigns. And Zelazny said, okay. And he's an issue. And Amberzine ran for 12 issues. And I'm in my story, background story of one of my characters. So instead of like a campaign log that I'm trying to shoehorn into, because campaigns don't really have like beginning, middles, and ends and denouement the way of fiction. I wrote a backstory for my character so that it would have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and be like, and it was my first sale. And I'm in that issue, and Jane Lynch and Roger Zelazny, and that was just like my writing career. So if it hadn't been for role-playing games, my writing career might have longer to take off. So, such as like right now, I have like a couple of handfuls of published stories, like a dozen or so. 2 of which are coming out next year. One is going to be, and I'm just going to plug it because I like the editor. There's a Bain Books collection, High on Proxima B, and I'm in with Walter Johnson, and that's coming out next, and then I'm also in a shared world that Cadwell turned Many Worlds, and that's going to come out I think around April, the first Many Worlds anthology. We got some more comments. Where did TwinCon fit in? So I know Origins was Avalon Hills and miniatures fighting convention that is now Gen Con, which was a joke for those who don't realize. Gen Con wasn't always in India, Milwaukee. It started in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. So Gen Con, and so that was TSR's convention. Those were the 2 big ones, and I think still are the 2 big ones. But I don't know. I'm sorry. Our small group of RPG writers used through their team of players to get unique responses to use in books and shorts. That sounds awesome. Yeah, fabulous. That's a great way to support each other and do that. I think that's super cool. Let's look at the live chat. Yeah, for some reason, I'm not seeing the recent. I'm trying to look at all the chat on Facebook on my phone, and I'm not seeing the recent. So if you want to be identified by name, just please put your name or use this app. So if you're on Facebook, it'll otherwise, and I can't really see that. Okay, so questions. If not, I can keep vamping, and I'm done plugging my own material, but I can keep vamping, and I'm happy to do that. So one of the most creative people is a guy named he publishes as Kenneth Hite, Ken, whom I happened to meet in college, and he was known for having like a kind of campaigns and homegrown rules, and he's a good writer actually of fiction. Yeah, he's awesome. He is RPG royalty. He's just and he's really sweet. He's really nice. I remember I was in a game of his called Pirates and Pentacles, based on things like On Stranger Tides by Tim Powers, and came out years before these. And I played a gunner named Mad Jack Foley, which I got frustrated with anything. I could just fire all the cannons at a bunch of ships. you know, off the wall. So that was the kind of thing he would do. He would come up with various games, do these campaigns. He's lots of fun to get a chance to game with Ken at a con where he's game mastering or whatever. He's wonderful. What else? So yeah, I went to college in Chicago, which meant that I was now living in the Midwest, and I was going to gym because it was in Milwaukee at that time. It was only 2 hours away, and a periphery of all of this, the center of things. So the people who were there at that time. But again, I did to gaming, like writing. There is one minor game work I did on it back when I was doing graphic design. But oh yes, you're reminded of the Ken and Robin Talk About an excellent podcast. If only because they're going to talk about, like, anything is a lot of fun. What makes a good opinion? Liam asks. Excellent question. So the best game masters keep in mind endeavor is for everyone to have fun. And so what does that mean for a group? So a good game master, maybe over time, hopefully quickly, what each player really wants out of it, right? Like if one player's like, I just want to enjoy combat and tactical and do a good job of defeating this group, like the tactical miniature battle aspect of it, great. Characters like, I don't care about that, I just want role playing. So more like kind of thing. You got to include that. And sometimes you have to balance these ideas of what they want. Some people game for just because, like, I'm going to go to my friend's house, we're going to have pizza, we're going to have some beer, and I'm just going to roll some dice when they tell me to roll dice. But mostly I'm just one kind of player, right? Another kind is like the power gamer, like trying to maximize and utilize it efficiently, the way a mathematician would utilize something efficiently. People, I was more of the, like, I want to tell a story. I want to have a story. When I was game mastering, I was like, I want to tell a cool story. And characters doing that doesn't fit the mood of, right? Like I create them, they're like, I want to do this goofy, silly thing, and there are players, but it breaks the mood as far that I was trying to set up, which is again why I started writing fiction, so that I were of a mood. Yeah, so obviously you can't please a disparate group of players all the time. Can rotate through the things that are most important to a way that you wind up making everyone have a good time. Yeah. Yes. Always try to balance the story arc for each player is important. It is important to some players and is not important to other players. So players for whom it is not important don't mind it. I found, generally speaking, toss in the story arc. I mean, the more hooks that you can, the better. Like this game that I'm not gaming, this 5e game, and it's a published campaign called something Descent to go to one of the outer planes, and it starts in this Forgotten Realms, which was created by Ed Green. I found to buy one of my stories for an anthology. Yay. That was like a fanboy moment come true. And anyway, this this game the that doesn't have strong hook out the particular city that you're trying to save, and so the dungeon's like, no, we're going to create characters who have who are part of this city. They're not just like what they call murder hobos, like show up over somewhere, like yeah. And so we're creating these characters. We're just in these characters that have background hooks into the universe, and so that is a delightful way to get the players involved, because then the character story arc is connected to the campaign story arc. You got some skin in the game, right? And Liam says, great answer. Thank you, Liam. Game master has to remember to be as impartial as possible. Absolutely, to all the players. Yeah, he or she has to be the referee for the game. Yeah, they used to, like back when I was starting Dungeons, the dungeon master or referee, right? So, yes, of course. Have a good time is that sense of fairness. Now, I've been in some campaigns, especially in Amber. Amber Dice's role playing, they're basically super powered gods. They often go off and do things on their own, like over here, and you go to that universe, and we'll meet up later at a tavern, right? And follow GM player stuff. And so, one of the best game, Ray Williams, and she pioneered the idea of like a literal timer, so that each player equal amount of time for this when the characters are separate. And when game master in Amber, because I found in Amber the player characters are often for long stretches of the game, and so because of again, and so literally giving equal is a really, it makes people feel good. Makes people feel good about the experience. Like they have a stake in the situation, and you actually get to listen into the other characters' adventure. So there's entertainment, and she brings snacks as well. That's the other important thing. Bring or set up something to rotate. Some agreement to rotate. Supposed to bring snacks that week, because snacks make people feel good, right? Like happy body, happy mood, right? That's the other thing about playing in a tabletop role playing, and you're not floating consciousness, like betting quiet. You're embodied in bodies, and you want your body to be happy, right? And then your mind is happy, and your emotions are happy, and it's like this in here. Our group would have snack team. Oh, I like that. That's taking it a level up. Like you're fighting a dragon, you get dragon cakes or something. I don't know. That's fabulous. Barbecue and sipping whiskey. You have my full approval of that. Absolutely, that's great. And maybe like chips and salsa, something like that. 5 rings with sushi and sake. Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. You're setting an in theme, and I think that kind of thing actually helps the players. Remember, I found frustrating game mastering was sometimes the players would have no sense theme and the mood, and would just bring their own agenda about and this food thing is brilliant, because it sets the theme. early AmberCons where there were some rooms we would game in the rooms, and rooms that had these paintings that were very evocative, prints on the walls that were evocative, like garden. I would just incorporate those gardens into the adventure, right? So like, oh yeah, right. And so the room itself became a reminder of the adventure and was set the mood. Called AmberCon Northwest that takes place in Portland every first weekend in November is at a sort of a resort place called the Edgefield. Was painted by an artist collective, and so every room has these odd in there. Like you open up the electrical box with the all the off switches, and there's a lightning ball painted on it. I mean, just stuff like that everywhere. And there's a box with human hands, So if you're gaming Amber, where anything can happen of inspiration, you could say, well, you see a fox with hands, it looks just like that. It'd be fun. Visual aids, right? Herb says, just got someone who lives across the street from the neighborhood store to join your group and play at their house. Schedule break so everyone can trot to the store, get junk food and sodas. I like that. That's good. Yeah. Just make sure you clean the room before you leave and buy all the host snacks and drinks. So, I mean, are any more about writing in gaming? If anyone's a writer or just interested in the process, create a campaign from scratch versus how you would create a piece of fiction. Do that. Another big thing is like interpreting a published model in a way that makes it about you. Say you're about you, but you personalize it in such a way that that's like this the Slavers series from the A1 through 4, the way Cliff runs this module. That add things and subtract things and personalize it. It's like music by J.S. Bach, right? Like people think, oh, the score is the music and it's inviolate. And well, actually, he wrote for the singers he happened to have at his gig, paid church in Leipzig. And if he performed the same piece again several years later with bits for those singers, so you personalize things. Another Facebook user says, I like to make a plot tree when I design an RPG scenario. Sure. Excellent. Yeah. Like a choose your own adventure kind of thing. Only because you've got a whole cast of characters. Yeah. So that, because like when you're writing fiction, obviously there's one plot. But if you're writing an adventure, you got to get to certain beats that happen. You get there varies from group to group. So you have all the possible routes to these major plot points. And then it's with the orc at the corner table and just completely. Our experience as a player, we had 4-hour gaming slots. And in an RPGA, Role-Playing Gamers Association adventure, and we were supposed to go fight some band. The first part of the adventure was like, go to the town and outfit yourselves for the adventure. Like, you had some equipment. And I was at that wanting to get to the story, right? I'm about story. I wanted to get to the story. And every other player that had signed up for that slot wanted to go into the town and spend the entire 4 hours role-playing people. And they didn't care about the story or the plot, or it drove me crazy. So 4.5 hours in the town buying our equipment because they were just having having so much fun role playing, and I'm just now, yeah, allowing the player in a published scenario is challenging. It is. It's more challenging, I think, in a computer, in a tabletop, because the computer game can only be a computer game, but a tabletop can rejigger things, right? I got a mastering the Amber Diceless role playing game, because again, the power level was so high, and they could destroy and create universes literally. So you had to have stakes that would matter, that wouldn't feel like, oh, we're saving the multiverse again. And you had to somehow, so you depended on character and interactions and the things that mattered to that character. Multi-world spanning gods have, annoying younger brothers and things. That's what Zelazny did alchemically, magically with that. User-made scenarios and modules are kind of like fan fiction for RPGs. I'm gonna disagree with that in one sense, Liam, because the concept of module didn't exist yet. So there weren't. I mean, the Blackmore D&D supplement, there was like the Temple of the Frog or something like that. You had to make the modules because there were no published modules. So I would say it's more like RPGs are fan fiction for like fans and Michael Moorcock and J.R.R. Tolkien. But in the Traveler and the Klein, it's like for, like Asimov and Clark and all that stuff. But I think, I think that I've been in scenarios that were good and some that were not as good, and it depends on creating if the game master is creating their own scenario, it depends on how good they are, plot and structure and character and things, but also how much time they have. Like, they usually have a day job. Fantasy game with set in the 30s with stock characters of Jim and Errol Flynn was the bad. Errol Flynn was a good. That sounds a lot like the Rocketeer, and I'm a big fan of the Rocketeer. The hero's name is Cliff, so hey, there you go. That's kind of fun. And what else about that? Settings, like oftentimes, a homegrown scenario is because the game, right? Like Ken Hite, right? He would make up these didn't exist, and yeah, heavily influenced by that. Excellent. I would. A friend of mine, right now, unfortunately, it's not over Zoom, and he lives in. A friend of mine is running a campaign based on Jack Vance's Shape Planet, which I loved as a kid. Oh, Delta Green, excellent scenario. Anyways, based on the Jack Vance's Shape, I loved as a kid, and I would love to play in that game, right? Like to play in that world. He's several thousand miles away and running it tabletop, literally. So, but yeah, I mean, now we're kind of in a golden age of like, well, people are licensing things like I've seen an Escape from New York, Pacific Rim, same company, Pacific Rim license game. So you want to play in Pacific Rim? Someone's wrote it, has written it, and so these things, and then there's this annual like gaming paper thing that's on Kickstarter, where people like do, like, I got one micro game where you play literally play pandas who have invented aircraft to try and more efficiently steal trash from suburban homes. Not pandas, playing raccoons. You're playing raccoons. So what are my favorite? I started with Dungeons and Dragons, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, really, more than which was the and I love Traveler. I love Gamma World, which is this post-apocalyptic, post-nuclear war gonzo scenario. We started with a generation ship gone bad called Metamorphosis Alpha, and then ported the rules to Earth. And some of my favorite wacky mayhem was Gamma World. Amber Diceless roleplay, best designed, beautifully designed for the book series it was based on. There have been some attempts to use that rule system elsewhere. Lords of Gossamer and Shadow, which is a wonderful game. It's not based on a book series, and I think it's a little bit of a learning curve for people because it's this weird Amber Diceless role-playing game system put into a similar kind of characters, but there's no story hooks really that are in. You have to do a lot more work as a game master to make it happen. But it's fun. It's a good game. What else? Paranoia. I love Paranoia. Trust no one. Keep your lazy computer as your friend. That's a wonderful game. So there you go. Those are and let's see. In recent a lot of these are now, right? So yeah, Paranoia. Cyberpunk. I have a friend, Colin Fisk, who was one of the writers on that. Great game. What else? You're playing raccoons, trying to you invent like gliders and stuff. Break into suburban homes and steal stuff from the fridge. It's just wonderful. But it's got raccoons. I would love to see a role based on. Speaking of raccoons, based on Jeff Vandermeer's Southern Reach trilogy, be hilarious. That would be awesome. Especially since there is a system based on the weirdness that is Jeff Vandermeer. You just have to be weird. That would be interesting. That doesn't exist. Yes, trash pandas. I thought that's why I said pandas at first, because my brain went trash pandas, so I said pandas, but I meant raccoons. So yeah, that doesn't exist, but that would be fun. So when I was in college, the first version of Star Wars role playing yet, so I made my own home brewed rules and ran a Star Wars game. The game came out with theirs like a year or two later. So we had fun. So I've created a few role playing games, just home rules for use with my friends. I never published or sold any of them, but they were fun, and that's kind of a fun thing to do. If I get, the less I want to learn rule system, and the more I'm concerned with just story and setting. So, has anyone formalized a universe? I do not know. It would be really weird because Highlander 2, you'd have to like leave it out or something. There is role-playing games, one in the 80s and one currently. What else? Oh, Aliens. There's an Alien. There are a couple of Alien role-playing. 5 role-playing games for a while that I never played, but interesting. There was the role-playing game called, I think, Eclipse Phase. That again is one of those late games I've I've like tended to buy them and read the rules and enjoy them and then not play them. I don't know if anyone, but I've got, kids and are trying to get my writing gear, and so I don't have a lot of time for D&D game. And so when I see like, oh, I'm gonna buy that, I'm gonna run it with my friends, I just wind up like, oh, I read it, I enjoy it. So a lot of recent games for me. But when I was a kid and a teenager, and I had a lot more time playing things like plot and character and setting, role-playing games were a great way to learn. It was like, because you had immediate feedback, especially if you were game mastering. Try this, and the players are like, that sucked. You know that you learned something, and you try something else, and the players are like, oh, that's such. And I mean, what I joke about, I wanted and that's why I started doing fiction, but I also wanted to reach more than like 6 to 8 people. With that's been my motivator. Is like, I just want to tell good stories that people like. So the more you write, the less you game, it seems. Absolutely, in my case. I don't know if that's just get more inspiration, but I find that I have a finite and mental energy to do this kind of thing, and I can between role-playing games and writing fiction. And if I spend writing fiction and 10% doing role-playing games, then that's how it comes out. If I spend 90% doing role-playing, that's how that comes out. It's the same parts of my brain that do both. Is, because I also play music, and that's like a different part of my brain, right? Like, I can write. I'm in an independent choir, and we sing like Bach, Mozart, and I can go do that. I also play sitar. I can go do that, and it doesn't with the fiction writing at all. But gaming interferes in the sense that it is the same part of my brain is tired and done for the day, and and when I'm introvert and my brain is coming through with plot ideas and character ideas as it does, if I'm focused on gaming, that's what it comes up with, right? Like, oh, my character could do that, or I could write this about this scenario, and that's choice. I mean, the disadvantage of writing fiction is you're by yourself in a room. If you're an introvert, you might have got that subtle impression by the way I keep vamping on the solo thing. But so gaming, it's a social experience. You're having a good time. You have coffee years later. Hey, remember when we killed them or whatever? And fiction though is different. It's a solo endeavor, but when you sell, first of all, you actually get money for it when you sell it, which is kind of so much money that it's going to make a big difference in your life. It reaches. I have a story that I sold to an anthology. It's called, and then I resold it to the Escape Pod podcast when they printed it online, and as a result, I saw comments from total strangers, and that was such a nice feeling, right? Because somebody read the story. One of the anthologies I was in early on was all stories set. It was about the 40th anniversary of Apollo, and not mine, but the nomination. I was like, somebody's reading this book. So that's kind of nice. I don't know if you've been listening in. I've done my best to solo vamp through today, and I think I've been entertaining. I hope I've been entertaining and enlightening.
Well,
can you
I'm gonna have to. I was just gonna have to say I didn't hear Ticket to Ride mentioned.
Tell me about Ticket to Ride.
Well, it's one of those wonderful games that allows the competition, degree of luck, a good place for strategy to come out, and it's pretty good. And I was also going to say, my daughter pointed out to me she grew up never telling me she was interested in Dungeons and Dragons, and then one day I think she found a red suitcase full of my original Men in Magic and the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, Player's Handbook, and all that good stuff. And it was the most accusatory moment of my life when my daughter, who was into Dungeons and Dragons, found out that, oh yeah, I was one of those old farts. And so it was kind of funny. But so now I am obligated to write my will and leave the old red suitcase to her. But the beautiful thing is, Cliff, I've been listening in because I knew my internet connection was dragging this show down, and I thank you for doing a wonderful job. And I thank all of the guests that showed up. Were wonderful people and everything. And so,
yeah,
Cliff,
without the
thank you.
Guests, no show. Right? So.
Dude, it is never my show. You ever seen it when David Gerald and Jim Wright come on? I just turn myself off, go get a couple of cups of coffee, listen, get a couple more cups of coffee. Then about 20 after, I post a note that, oh, by the way, should I tell them if they've gone over 20 minutes? Everybody says no. And
No.
I believe that they're going to be on next week. And so I will announce it next week is Jim Wright and David Gerald. And that I will be posting the video link where Tom Whitmore, wonderful human being, knows more about anything than anybody.
He used to run
I'll post the link
near me.
Do you say that what?
Tom Whitmore used to be one of the co-runners at bookstore in Berkeley back when I was living in Oakland, which was nearby, and he used to go there at first time.
Yeah, I know. It was like, now he ran a porn shop, right? Porn bookstore.
I don't know if he ran a porn bookstore. He ran a science fiction.
I don't think he did, but you got to remember that if you don't pick on your friends a little bit, who can you have fun with? And
carried like Twilight and Laurel K. Hamilton. So I guess you could say it was a porn bookstore.
Okay, yeah, but now he's going to have to really hurt me. But again, our thoughts are with Greg or Astrid right now, and dealing what she's dealing with and being and brave the way she's sharing and allowing fandom to follow what's happening in what is really a very private moment.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank
I also, real quick, that writer Ann Harris from North also passed away a couple days ago from a stroke. And
who was this?
Big loss. Ann Harris. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I met them at Wisconsin.
I've been kind of occupied the last couple of weeks, so I haven't kept track of what's going on. But 2022 is shaping up to be going out with a sad moment. So thank you all, and I'm going to say good night.